Today I'm here talking with the successful Jessica Wilson, and we're going to talk about how she became a worldwide known journalist. Hi.
Hi, how are you doing?
Good, how are you? Thank you for coming.
Thanks for having me.
So you're known for being one of the top journalists at CNN News, but your life is a story of its own.
Yes, well, I've been a part of many historical events that prompted me to become a journalist. I was born in 1970 during the disco era, so traditional values weren't really being followed by young adults.
Where do you think you're going dressed like that?
I'm going to my friend's party.
Where?
His private loft.
You mean a nightclub where there's drugs and alcohol?
No, where there are fun neon parties. I swear I'll be responsible. There won't be any of that stuff there.
Yes, there will be. You're too naive to understand what goes on at these parties. Women wear promiscuous clothing, glitter everywhere, and unnatural makeup. And don't even get me started on the boys at these parties. They engage in grooming rituals and coming out looking feminine. Thank the Lord your father was never a part of that. The culture is based on funk, soul, pop, and salsa.
The culture, just because they act different doesn't mean they're bad people. And I'm not like you. I'm not going to snort cocaine on a daily basis. Have faith in me, Mom. That's my ride. I gotta go.
Fine, if you go, bring me some.
You were a young child. You saw President Reagan get shot, correct?
Yes. I was 11 years old on a school field trip in Washington, D.C. I remember it very vividly, especially the sounds of people screaming and the sound the gun made.
Okay, now follow me. To our right, we have the Washington Hilton Hotel, where our current president of the United States is. How cool is that?
Oh my gosh! Look!
Oh,
it's so cool!
Now walking out of the building. Oh my gosh!
See, he's waving at us!
It was a horrible sight. You had people running in all different directions. My teacher was yelling at all of us terrified kids who had no idea what was going on. The president had just got done with his speech, which is why there was a crowd of people standing outside the hotel. They had a limo waiting for him, and right before he got in, he was shot.
Now, did your teacher tell you anything else about the assassination attempt?
Not until years later when I was much older and out of high school. We still keep in touch to this day. As I got older, I did research on the man who shot President Reagan and found out that he had an obsession with Jodie Foster, which is why he shot him. How insane is that?
Very. Now, did this experience change you in any way?
It definitely made me realize how short life is.
So you were also in West Berlin when the Berlin Wall fell. Can you describe that experience for me?
Well, I was 19 when I decided to study abroad in Germany in late October of 1989 because I was interested ever since our president at the time, Ronald Reagan, traveled to West Berlin himself in 1987 and said his famous line, "Tear down the wall." Also, I knew there were tensions in the East and West Berlin, and I thought this would be a great opportunity for me to get a jump start at learning how to become a journalist.
So how did you end up at the Berlin Wall?
I was in West Berlin getting information on how people escape from east to west, and I learned that some people dug tunnels under the wall, others used hot air balloons to fly over the wall at night, some even ziplined over the wall to escape.
Why do you think this happened?
Well, the East Berliners wanted freedom, and some wanted capitalism, but both were forced to be the same and have a communist state. Some people didn't mind, but others thought that their freedom was being taken away by the Soviet Union. In West Berlin, the U.S. made capitalism and the society successful, which gave the chance for the West Berliners to have freedom.
As we now know, the wall fell on November 9th, 1989. Anything else you could tell us about that day?
In both East and West Berlin, there was excitement. People on both sides tore down the wall into pieces, and the Stasi, or police, didn't really do anything. Many people reunited with their families. Since the last leader of the Soviet Union, Mikhail Gorbachev, loosened security, this allowed the fall of the Berlin Wall. I was glad I ended up at that place that day because it was truly life-changing.
So I wanted to talk to you about something that happened right outside your apartment window, the riots that happened in Los Angeles.
Yes, I was 22 years old and living in South Central Los Angeles when this all went down. I woke up to a rock being thrown through my window. I got up and looked out my window only to find thousands of people scattered throughout the streets, holding up signs with hundreds of other windows broken. Little did I know that day, April 29th, would be the start of 6 long and gruesome days, also known as the LA riots.
How did you find out what was going on?
Well, I quickly turned on my TV to hear the long-awaited verdict of Rodney King. The jury acquitted 4 officers of the LAPD of the use of excessive force in the videotaped arrest and beating of Rodney King. The unrest began right on that street outside my window, and it then spread throughout the Los Angeles metropolitan area as more and more people joined the riot.
Now, how did the 55 deaths, 2,000 plus injuries, and 11,000 plus wounded happen?
Due to the widespread rioting, looting, assault, arson, protests, property damage, firefights, and murder, about 4,000 California Army National Guardsmen patrolled the city to enforce the law.
Now, I understand that your dad was involved in the 1993 World Trade Center bombing.
Yes, he was. I remember it like it was yesterday.
Dad, what's going on? Are you okay?
I'm fine. Luckily, I was in the South Tower, not the North Tower.
What happened to the North Tower?
I heard that a truck was driven into the garage underneath the North Tower and it contained a bomb. I've heard from the authorities that the terrorist goals were to send the North Tower crashing into the South Tower, but they failed to do so.
How many people are hurt?
So far, only 6 people have died, but there are a lot more people still stuck in the elevators, and authorities are trying to figure out a way to get them out there before another possible bomb explodes.
Do they know who did it?
They're still trying to figure it out, but I've heard there are at least 6 men involved. They think their motives are based on Islamic fundamentalism, which is the movement of Muslims who seek to return the fundamentals of religion in the earlier times.
Have they said anything else about the bomb?
Not yet. They're trying to calm everyone down. The bomb caused all the power to be cut off in the North Tower, and now all the radios and television stations are down, including even more panic. I'll call you back when I find out more.
Okay, stay safe. I worried all day that another bomb would explode and I would get a call saying my father had died.
That must have been very hard for you. Were you afraid that the terrorists wouldn't get caught?
For a long time, I was. I wasn't relieved until a year later when 4 men were convicted, and then in 1997 when 2 more were convicted. So far, no one else has been convicted, and I am thankful to this day that my dad was not one of the 6 that died that day.
I know you studied abroad multiple times in many different countries, including North Korea.
Yes, I did. I studied abroad there in 1995 to 1996 and even witnessed the North Korean famine. It was huge news over there and everyone was freaking out.
Can you tell us more about your experience and what you remember?
Well, when I got to North Korea, the famine had already started, but I hadn't heard much about it before I got there. But when I did finally arrive, there were major floods and droughts. I remember reading a statistic that said only 20% of North Korea's mountainous terrain is arable land. Plus, the land is only frost-free for 6 months. This intensified everyone's fear of not having any food for months.
Now, I thought I read somewhere that 22 million people died from those droughts. Do you believe this is true?
Absolutely. Not only was North Korea suffering from droughts and floods, they were also suffering from the Soviet Union, demanding large payments that North Korea couldn't pay. This led them to lose the Soviet aid and the flow of imports decreased majorly.
Since you were a woman, did you suffer any more than the others did?
Everyone suffered, but I would say women suffered the most because we're women. I saw many pregnant women in fear of losing their babies because they didn't have the right food and nutrients to supply their needs.
Now, do you regret studying abroad?
Not at all. I think it gave me a new perspective on life and made me realize my life could be way worse. People can talk about historical events like these, but the only way you truly understand it is if you were there and experienced it. And I know now to never take anything for granted.
One of your big stories was being one of the first reporters to catch the dot-com boom. Here's a clip of you in 2000.
I'm here reporting at 11th of Wall Street in New York City, where just a few weeks ago, Dell and Cisco placed huge sell orders on their stocks, on their online investments, and has started a frenzy with other investors. This new boom, or bubble, as some would call it, started as rapid technological advancements in the early 1990s that led to a period of a steady commercial growth of the internet, with the advent of the World Wide Web, WWW. Here to tell us a little bit more about this .com is a professor of economics from Columbia University, Drew Schuer.
The dot-com boom shifted people from computational to communicating devices, which led to an increase of networks throughout the internet.
Why do you think this has become so popular?
Well, because it was promised new visions for the future realistic, or not, that had people wanting and dreaming for these things to happen.
When you say visions, what do you mean?
I'm talking about promises of superhighways, which are fast ways to communicate, graphics and whatnot, or internet refrigerators that can sense the items in them. Advancements in technology that people are craving, something new. So because of this, lots of people and other investors starting to invest in these internet companies once there was this advancement period where we could communicate with each other, share information, look things up on the internet. Investors saw this as a gold mine, and by investing in, they would gain some sizable profit.
What formed this bubble?
Well, it was mostly cheap money, easy capital, market overconfidence, and pure speculation. TVs and computers were already made, but the new network computer that could communicate to the world was what really set it off.
So since Dell and Cisco sold their stocks, there has been sort of a panic with these new investments. What do you think is the cause of that?
I think that when two big companies sell their own stocks, other investors are going to get worried about their own. Also, profits have not been made for the investors, but you never know. This is the stock market.
Well, thank you for your time, Drew. In the passing weeks since the sell orders of Dell and Cisco has been announced, a spark of panic has been put into investors. The stock market has lost 10% of its value. As investments begin to dry up, the lifeline of cash supported by the investors dries up too far for the internet companies. I'm Jessica Wilson, reporting live on 11th Wall Street at CNN News.
We all know what happened during 9/11. An Islamic extremist group hijacked 4 airliners and carried out suicide attacks against targets in the United States. 2 of the planes were flown into the towers of the World Trade Center in New York City, and a 3rd plane hit the Pentagon just outside Washington, D.C., and a 4th plane crashed into the field in Pennsylvania. Over 3,000 people were killed during the attacks in New York City and Washington, D.C., including more than 400 police officers and firefighters. But can you tell me what you remember from 9/11? What was going on in your head during that time?
That was definitely a day that I will never forget. I felt nothing but sorrow for these people and the loved ones they would never see again. I was thinking about Dad a lot in that moment. I knew he was home, sick for the day. My immediate reaction was to call and make sure he was okay. But when there was no answer after 3 or 4 calls, I began to freak out. I broke into tears every time I asked myself if he was really at home or if he was in the World Trade Center. When I thought about these people never seeing loved ones again, I realized that was me and I never saw my dad again.